Okay, welcome everyone. Good to have you here today. As you know, this is part of our collaborative multi-CCCR speaker series. And today we are glad to have the group from the American Joint Replacement Research Collaborative at the Mayo Clinic. And we have three speakers today. They are Dr. Daniel Berry, who is the director of their administrative core, Dr. David Lewallen, who is the associate director and then also the associate director of the administrative core, and Hilal Maradit Kremers, who is the director of the methodology core. And as shown here, they're going to be talking about the American Joint Replacement Research Collaborative, leveraging a national procedural registry to improve outcomes. And we will, I believe, have time for questions at the end during the presentation, though you're welcome to go ahead and put them in the chat. Okay, to our speakers, when you're ready, please go ahead and proceed.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Barry. I'm the PI on this P30 grant. Dr. Allen, thank you for the introduction. We will try to keep this to 30 minutes. We'll make sure that we have 15 minutes at the end for discussion and questions. Dave, can you advance the slides, please? I will briefly just let you know what our P30 grant is designed to do and study. Dr. Kremers will talk with you a little bit about what we've done over the past cycle. We're in our start of our second cycle now, and what we have been doing this cycle. Dave will talk to you more about what we're doing this cycle and what we intend to do this cycle. And then, of course, we'll open it for questions after that. Next slide, please, Dave. So what are we? Our P30 grant is designed primarily to try to improve the quality of total joint arthroplasty research in the United States. So as such, it's a national effort, not a single institution effort. And it's a national effort that leverages a variety of national resources and also collaborations. And I'll elaborate on those here briefly in a minute. The main goal is to do so, that is to improve the quality of arthroplasty research by using large databases that have become available, but also to some degree also new methodologies and techniques within those databases, and also by fostering multi-center randomized or non-randomized trials in orthopedics, which unfortunately we don't do enough of, but we would like to do more of. So our research effort is a collaborative effort between the Mayo Clinic, where we're all based, and the American Joint Replacement Registry, which I'll tell you more about in a minute, which is a very, very large database of about over 4 million patients, and the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, who now runs the American Joint Replacement Registry. As I told you, the goal is to try to improve the quality of research within arthroplasty at a national, not just regional level. And as a secondary goal, it's to try to foster a younger community of investigators who can carry this work on and improve upon it over the next years and decades. We also, as I mentioned to you, are working hard to get a number of multi-center trials up and going. And Dave will talk a little bit more about that when he gives some further information about what we're up to right now. As I mentioned to you, we're in the start of our second cycle after our first cycle, which was 2019 to 24. So we've just started our second 5-year cycle. We have an administrative core, a methodology core, and a resource core. And the resource core is made up of the American Joint Replacement Registry primarily. So we have a collaborative relationship with them, and it's been a very productive one. Dave, next slide, please. I'll tell you a little bit about the American Joint Replacement Registry because so much of what we do hinges upon that. It was started as a multi-stakeholder effort between a variety of different societies within orthopedics, and also the orthopedic industry and the insurance industry. So the idea was to try to get much more detailed information about the outcomes of joint replacement procedures in the United States at a large national level that you could then extrapolate to one's individual practice. I will point out that the main reasons for getting that registry together hinged around creating a tripwire for problem implants or problem procedures, but also to provide information about what's working best, what's working a little less well, and how to, if you will, optimize the results of joint arthroplasty of the hip and knee. It's become pretty big. By last year, we had over 4 million cases. I'll tell you a little bit about that. And it's one of a handful of different national registries around the world. There are quite good ones in the UK, Australia, and the Scandinavian countries in particular. Germany also has one now. But what I would say is that this has now become the biggest registry. It's not quite as complete as some other registries in the world in terms of getting full enrollment because we don't have a public health system, but it is a very, very large registry. It's become a very, very powerful data source. Dave, next slide, please. The registry is built around every physician who is a member of the registry and a hospital that's a member of the registry submitting all of their patients who have hip and knee arthroplasties. And on each of those patients, we collect information on the patient, the hospital, the surgeon, the implant, the outcome of the procedure, and whether any further surgeries are ever done. One of the unique elements of the registry is that we have a linkage with the Medicare database, so we know the outcome of every single patient that goes into the registry that's over 65 because we were able to follow them up through the Medicare database. A few other just comments. We can use it for implant utilization information. We can use it for implant survivorship information. We can also use it for patient-related questions in terms of disease processes and so forth. We also have PROMs that are collected on at least a number of the patients, although I must say that that's been a little spottier in terms of the number of surgeons that actually submit and report PROMs. Next slide, please, Dave. As of now, there's over 4.5 million cases in the registry, so it's become a pretty powerful data source. We get data from over 1,500 institutions. We get information now from over 300 ambulatory surgical centers, which is important because a lot of joint replacements are now done in those centers. And it means that we collect data from over 5,000 surgeons. So it's become a pretty comprehensive, pretty powerful database. It also provides us a source in which we can nest trials. And Dave will talk to you a little bit more about that and our preliminary work on that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So I think with that, I have given you a little bit of brief background. We won't belabor it. I'm happy to answer questions about the registry itself later. But I think at this point, we will turn it over to Dr. Kremers, who's our colleague who works in epidemiology and as a essential part of our grant. So Hilal, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're muted, Hilal.
Oh, sorry. This is a brief overview under 6 bullets, our accomplishments over the last 6 years. One of our first activities was the workshop on large databases. This was because arthroplasty literature is pretty much characterized by either small, underpowered single center studies or large administrative claims database studies that do not contain the key data elements on exposures, outcomes, and confounders. And the workshop focused on, best ways to do these studies. We also published a methodology series on some of the foundational statistical and AI methodology concepts, ranging from survival analysis to application of the machine learning and computer vision methods. And the reason being is that some of these foundational concepts are typically described in other disease settings, and it had been hard for orthopedic investigators to understand and incorporate them into their own research. We supported several pilot projects. We also continue to support statistical reviews of the National Registry studies. We established a research fellowship program with 5 fellows so far. And we are now most excited about our first ever prospective clinical nested trial nested within the National Registry. Next slide. Briefly about this trial, it's a simple 2-arm trial about extended 1-week antibiotic prophylaxis in primary hip and knee arthroplasty patients. It originally started at University of Iowa and currently recruiting at 5 sites. Next slide. This trial is very important to us. That's one of our major activities moving forward, as it allowed us to build the infrastructure for nested trials, multi-center nested trials within the National Registry. We have already enrolled more than 1,000 patients and recently submitted a UG3, UH3 grant for further expansion to other centers. So handing over to you, Dr. Lewallen.
Thanks very much. We have a number of things that we'll be focusing on over the next 5 years, and we can't cover them all, but we're going to try to emphasize this nested trial effort because we thought that of the different things we've done, this tool really may be of interest to others in other fields and other specialties, not only in orthopedics, but across medicine. We'll try to go into some detail, but you can see here all of the various things that we are focusing on as part of the three cores from a general standpoint. We've wanted to try to focus on high impact areas of research, and here's a list of some of those areas that we have plans and projects in place. But I'm going to spend some time, as mentioned, talking about the prospective multi-center trials that we think we can facilitate using the AJRR as a tool and a really linchpin for this. And over the next 5 years, we'll be doing all of the things shown here. But within the area of nested trials specifically, we have spent the last year really soliciting detailed input from across our arthroplasty community, our academy, and then also the subspecialty societies, hip, knee, and then yes, we have a hip and knee society as well, as typical across medicine, multiple different groups. We did convene a consensus conference in person, organized with the help of the Orthopedic Research and Education Foundation as sort of a neutral arbitrator, bringing those various societies together, and just completed that on July 18th in Chicago. The key really to this nested trial effort is shown here on this slide. As Dan described, all institutions that participate now across the country send in a fairly robust data set on both the patient, the hospital, the surgeon, but the procedure itself. And this is the only registry that has information specific to the implants. We have barcode information on all of the various parts of the devices, the different doodads. There are multiple things that go into a total knee, for example. And so we have all of the specifics on that so we can track the performance of these and outcomes. And that base information is sort of the trunk of the tree that forms the AJRR. But when investigators wish to do studies, it's possible to add on specific study elements that go beyond that basic information that any prospective trial would require anyway. And that information is already loaded in the AJRR, quote unquote, for free, if you will, so that the investigator sites really have a decreased burden of additional data that they need to collect. And there's still work to be done, but it's less work on the part of those individual study coordinators, if you will, on an individual patient, once patients are consented for these prospective trials. The other key element Dan mentioned is that we currently have 100% follow-up on the Medicare population, which is roughly half of the arthroplasties done in the United States. And that means long-term follow-up, again, for free, if you will, because if at 5 or 10 years, there's a signal on one of these devices or related to certain patient conditions, it's possible to go find out how all those Medicare patients did that were done 10 years prior, with reliable information on things such as reoperations and revisions. So really a unique opportunity, which would dramatically reduce the expense of long-term follow-up, which is really extremely expensive for longitudinal studies otherwise. Our current priorities in the area of these clinical trials are shown here. We want to have the best studies, both by topic and then individual sort of granular level study proposals. We think the way to do that is to have a consensus from the community and then go on to improve the depth and breadth and completeness of the data that's collected. Our goal is to have at least one new major nested prospective trial per year over the next 5 years. We'd like to exceed that, but we plan to achieve at least one study per year. And also actively seeking additional linkages from other large data sources. The obvious question is, how do we capture the other 50% of arthroplasty patients that have private insurance coverage that aren't in the Medicare data set? And we're actively working on those efforts to get not just de-identified data, which has been accomplished prior to this, but identifiable by individual patient data that can be linked, since that's what's required for determining long-term outcomes and implant-specific results. And then additional funding. Of course, none of this happens without money, and so we have strategies and robust efforts underway to try to expand the funding for these efforts across the entire orthopedic community. Our immediate next steps are to assimilate the input that we received from this July 18th meeting. We're actually, as of even today, working on going through the results of that consensus conference and preparing summaries for the participants, and then moving on to the next steps. We plan to request specific prospective clinical trial proposals later this year that can be reviewed and through a consensus process selected and prioritized for completion. And we have funding in place of a collective sort, both through the grant and from the community and from ORIF, but we obviously need to expand those efforts to achieve our vision. And then starting the trial that's selected this year later, 2025, and then repeating this process, if you will, on an annual basis in an ongoing way. To give you just an idea of what we accomplished in that meeting, there was a lot of discussion across a range of topics, but I'll show you how we approached this. We were able to get agreement from the group on sort of 6 main topic areas, if you will, and they're shown here. And we have a wide range of specific recommendations under each of these categories. I just picked out perioperative management as an example to show you kind of how the process went. So under the heading of perioperative management, there's really a lot there about how to take care of these patients and optimize their care. But one of the topics that everybody agreed was important is the high BMI patient. This is a real challenge for us in orthopedics in general and arthroplasty particularly, with 40% of the population at least overweight, if not obese. A range of different things that could be looked at was discussed, but there was good consensus and upvotes, if you will, when people individually voted on the things of importance to them around the idea of looking at GLP-1 drugs for pre-op use in patients with BMI over 40. So of those different topics, this is the one that sorted out as the one the group felt would be at the top of the list, if you will. And that similar process took place across the range of topics under those various headings. So what's the future of nested trials in the AJRR? We obviously want to increase the number and size of prospective clinical trials in arthroplasty. These have been difficult efforts in the past and quite expensive. And we want to build this and then export the idea to the other specialties in orthopedics, a number of which now have registries under the AAOS, where we think this could be replicated as a model. It will be helpful in validating the safety and efficacy of new technology, implants, and biologics, an area that's really exploding within orthopedics. And quite frankly, we're going to need some real help in terms of trying to assess what works and what doesn't in an organized way. And this could provide a valuable tool. We think it's also a pathway for reducing the burden of pre-market approval, not just for manufacturers who obviously have an interest, but for patients when new things come along and for practitioners. And dramatically improve post-market surveillance using the mechanism I mentioned before by linking these collective data aggregation of long-term follow-up from things such as the Medicare data set. And I think it'll really make it practical to do IDE studies of truly novel technology moving forward. These are incredibly expensive, and I think things that we can do to make them more efficient, less expensive would be really helpful and stretch the available dollars to be able to do more for patients. I think that this concept provides a template not only for other orthopedic specialties, but could be of interest to other medical specialties that have access to registries around the work that they do, and help provide the critical level 1 data needed to best answer the real important clinical questions and improve care, something we really haven't had enough of in orthopedics in general and in arthroplasty particularly. So what about the money? That funding always is a key issue. We have efforts underway already. OREF is a valuable partner here in helping to coordinate efforts across our orthopedic community as a neutral arbitrator. They've had experience doing this in the past and are very good at it. We have support from the organizations that were present at our consensus conference, and I think we'll continue to get that. Orthopedic industry is a potential partner. I think there are orthopedic surgeons who participate in the development of new devices, and it's a natural sort of partnership to try to take some of the efforts that have been done in the past in perhaps less ideal fashion and do really objective clinical trials, that are done by an unbiased group, if you will, through the registry to try to really improve the information needed for regulatory approval. We've established a prospective clinical trials fund within OREF with a few small dollars from individual orthopedic surgeon donors, and are working actively to expand support across the community for this. And there are also discussions underway with individuals who have the capacity and interest in making major gifts through OREF, and we would love to eventually see a center for prospective orthopedic clinical trials made possible by donors in our community. We think that might be our moonshot, if you will, in the area of clinical trials. So with those comments, I'm happy to throw this open now to the group for discussion and any questions, but hopefully you've had a chance to see a bit of a summary of what we've been up to with the dollars that we've received for our P30 Center grant, for which we're most appreciative. I'll try to stop sharing my screen here and let everybody comment as they wish.
Yeah, thanks. Floor is open, folks. Were there any submitted? Sorry, Dr. Allen, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any submitted chat questions. I didn't see them, but maybe I missed them.
No, I don't see anything in the chat either.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
No, I was just going to echo your invitation for people to go ahead and chime in with questions, comments.
I can get it started. I'm Richard Loser. I'm a rheumatologist that does osteoarthritis research here at UNC. I was wondering if any of your sites collect biospecimens, blood or urine that might be used for biomarker studies, or even tissues at the time of surgery, or is this strictly clinical data, no biospecimens from any site?
It's a great question. Dave may want to comment on it further as well. The American Joint Replacement Registry does not have an arm for biospecimens. We do collect biospecimens at many of the sites that are participating hospitals So, for example, the Mayo Clinic has got a huge effort in that regard. You may know something about that. And so do many of the other participating sites, but there has not been an effort to try to link the data from the biospecimens between sites, although there has been some discussions about it. The main hurdle, as you I'm sure know and can guess, is a legal one. And also if you will, hospitals interested in keeping proprietary information they view as potentially valuable. And so for that reason, we haven't really pushed on that. And particularly when it comes to genetic stuff, as you know, there's all kinds of privacy protections around that that are complicated. One of the biggest problems of getting the registry going in the first place, and Dave and I are both involved in that process, was overcoming all the legal hurdles to data sharing, just of the data in the registry, much less biospecimens. So we'd love to hear any thoughts you might have about both the importance of that and any information you might have about ways to overcome the big legal hurdles. But we recognize it would be super valuable, but we also are a little bit reluctant to wade into a water full of alligators.
Yeah, and if I could just make an additional comment on a positive side, I think that's a great idea. And it's the kind of thing that we're looking for from the community, because let's just say there's 20 hospitals around the country that currently collect this kind of information. Let's say they do it on rheumatoid patients who are having arthroplasty. That may very well exist. Be a great example of a subset of hospitals that already send information into the AJR anyway, a huge amount of the data you would need to collect anyway, already submitted for free. And a study proposal that, was a coalition of the willing, if you will, that would, if you go to their institution and argue for additional sharing of data to a trusted partner where there's already a legal arrangement in place with the AJRR. They're already sending patient identifiable data that's sensitive about their, comorbidities and their implants and their BMI and everything else. That's all going in there now. And this would be incremental additional information that's sent in that the patients consent to, as they would with any, investigation. And I think that that might be a very feasible thing, actually, to accomplish. Not that it's free, not that it's easy, but I think the hurdle is not as high. It's low hurdles instead of high hurdles if this is a track meet,
Yeah, I don't know about the legal side, but I could say that, from the science side, you could think of some fantastic studies that you could do, considering you have such a large database and so much follow-up data as well. So, because a lot of people I know, like you all, are you interested in, predicting bad outcomes? And that
Right.
might be feasible by things like combining biomarkers with clinical data.
Absolutely.
You're on to a really important area, Richard. There's just zero doubt about it. And Dave gave the hurdles analogy. I'll say the high hurdles are high, but they're short. The low hurdles are low, but they're long, and probably getting there takes a while. But I do think it's certainly a great idea and one that would be worth pursuing. And Dave's right that because there are already some information sharing things in place, the barrier to entry, if you will put it that way, might be a little bit less. I'm sure it would still exist, but it'd be less.
And it's a great example why we need to talk broadly about this tool, because we just had a day-long meeting in Chicago, but it was a bunch of car mechanics all talking about hardware, right? And nobody brought up this sort of biologic slant on it, but it's a great idea.
Thanks. That was great comment, great question, and a good discussion. Thank you. Others?
There's another question in the chat. What type of clinical trials do you anticipate orthopedic procedures? ?
Dave, you want to comment on that? We just went through this big consensus meeting that Dave alluded to, trying to choose the most potentially productive and feasible prospective either studies or randomized trials to do across arthroplasty. And we did it along the lines that Dave described, which was 6 sort of big topic buckets. And within each of those topic buckets, we discussed probably somewhere between 10 and 20 different potential studies. So Dave may want to say a little bit more about that. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, kind of slicing the salami a little differently. We showed the buckets and then some of the an example of an individual sort of list of topics in one area. But looking at it a little differently, I think you could group the recommendations or the ideas on studies into sort of three categories. There were, hardware related sorts of things, of course, like my prior comments, given the people that we convened, how do robots do when it comes to putting in unicompartmental knees and things of that sort. Big interest to us, maybe not as much interest to rheumatologists, right? There were a second group of things that were centered around what I would call patient factors, which sort of patients do well, which sort of patients don't do well, what things can we do to, manage them better. And then I think that the third sort of category, if you will, are process related questions, things that relate to delivering arthroplasty care broadly, if you will. And a lot of the things, not everything, but a lot of the things that we went over specifically in the different sub areas could be thought of in those ways, if that answers the individual's question.
See questions come up from Jason Kim. Thank you, Jason, for your question. And can we just display that so everybody can see it again? Where did it go here?
Are you talking about Jason's question or?
Yes. I just want to make sure we captured the whole thing because I saw it briefly and then it disappeared from my screen.
Yeah, so it's still in the chat. And
okay, sorry. Okay, I'll just get it from the chat. Okay, good. Do we have imaging and navigation data? We do not have imaging data in this registry yet. All the individual sites, of course, have vast imaging information, but we have specifically not put imaging in here, although we've always considered it, if you will, the next arm that would be obvious to put in, because we've got patient data, we've got surgeon data, we've got implant data, we don't have imaging data. And the imaging data would be important both for preoperative purposes as well as postoperative purposes, because as you know, one way of assessing arthroplasty is the clinical outcome, but another way is how things do radiographically, and they're often congruent, but not always. So the answer is we'd love to have the imaging data. Part of the challenge has been, again, the legal stuff that we talked about earlier that relate to tissue, but maybe not quite as big with imaging data. And the other has just been storage capacity, which has probably been overcome more recently. Dave, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, if I could make a general comment. From the beginning, when we were building the registry, there was a tension between the splitters and the lumpers in the room, okay? So as we talked about, what is the list of data we should collect, right? You can imagine there were some people that had an extensive list of all the different things would be really nice to have, right? And then there were the pragmatists that said, we have a burden of reporting by institutions. If we make this too difficult, none of them will participate, or they will participate in a way that is suboptimal with lots of missingness to the data sets that we collect, right? And so we struck a compromise. And I would describe the AJR today as the trunk of a tree, a pretty robust tree trunk. But there's an endless number of branches that would be nice to have that aren't on there. And we've talked about, radiographic factors and biomarkers, but there's an endless list of additional things. There were people were talking about versions of software for a particular robot and how that makes a difference maybe in outcomes, okay? To talk about granular, okay? And we just simply can't collect all that stuff physically, and the burden for the reporting institutions with current mechanisms of reporting would be too great. But this is where the research design comes in. We built this thing intentionally with the tree trunk analogy so that researchers could come back and bolt on a branch and say, for this research study, we're going to do the work, we're going to bear the burden of reporting and consenting and all the rest to get something that's really important to us, but we're only going to be able to do it in 30 hospitals, and 400 patients or something of that sort. but still a very valuable way to get a trial done in a pragmatic fashion at much less expense. And what we're hoping to do really is get people to view what we've done as a tool, not an answer. It's a tool to answer the questions people come up with, and what they want to look at will inform what the study has to look like and what the incremental data is that's added on top as a branch on the tree, if you will.
Thanks, Dave. That was good. Michelle Ramirez had a question. Michelle will try to address your question. It relates to access of the to the data in the registry for studies. The answer is that anyone who participates in the registry can get back unlimited data on their own patients and unlimited data on aggregated data from the registry for comparison for quality improvement purposes. If one wants to do a research study, you have to be a member of the registry, a contributing member of the registry. You can then submit a research proposal. It's reviewed by a committee within the registry. As a P30 grant, one of our jobs is to help the registry vet those requests in terms of methodologic rigor and so forth and scientific value. And then if they're chosen, then they can usually get accomplished in a reasonable length of time with the help statistically from the registry and from us. Dave, you may want to say a few more things about it. That was just sort of a quick background comment.
And to date, all of those requests to date have been for retrospective data. So looking at patient procedures over such and such years, focused on a particular question or a particular implant, and asking a question about what they are interested in from research perspective, and that's great, and those kinds of studies will go on forever, and that's been traditional registry work, with survivorship curves and implant specific reports and alerts on implants are not performing as well as they should compared to the national metrics that are established. Those are all extremely worthy endeavors. And that's been the work so far. What we're talking about now is kind of a different era and a different level of complexity, which is trying to envision prospective trials of some sort, randomized or not. And that's obviously a bigger undertaking, and that's why we've carved that out as kind of a separate area. And the other part of it is that AJR only has limited bandwidth. They can't do an endless number of those kinds of prospective trials with the resources required. Whereas they can knock off the retrospective studies, pretty quickly and in larger numbers.
And just to put a fine point on it, the whole value of the registry and what we're trying to do with a grant in terms of prospective studies has to do with the value of facilitating multi-center prospective studies, because what it really does is it lowers the bar for data collection, because most of the data is being collected already, and it lowers the bar for working together because the legal framework has been established, and it lowers the bar for statistical analysis because we have the facilities to do that to some degree through our P30 grant. So that's the idea, which is to take the entire activation energy of doing a multi-center trial, which we all know is incredible, cut that activation energy down, and then try to choose trials that we can either get funding for or fund from within the profession.
Yeah, the other thing I think we have the potential to do is to make it a more democratic process, if you will, and I use that term broadly here, where some investigator in Armpit, Wyoming may come up with a great idea, but they don't have the resources locally from a methodological support or other to support doing the study or the experience to go out and get it funded. This provides a mechanism for them to bring forward an idea, if they achieve consensus and followers, to really be able to participate as one of multiple trials. And in fact, we want pragmatic information from smaller institutions, from non-academic center, to look at the results there as well, not just from some place like NYU or Mayo Clinic. So we're intentionally trying to make this a broad community-based effort in that way.
Kelly, we'll turn it back over to you. There's about 3 or 4 minutes left in the session, I think. And I don't know if there's any summary questions or comments you would like to make, but it's the floor is yours.
No, I don't have any additional questions. I just would open it up one more time to see if there are any comments from others. Any further questions? We appreciate this description of what's clearly been a very big effort to combine all of these data. Jason
And I would
says,
just say, any of us, Hilal, Dan, I, involved with this effort would be happy to provide additional follow-up or information if any of you want to reach out and get a hold of us by email or whatever. We're zealots when it comes to this registry stuff, so we're happy to talk registry stuff anytime if you want.
Yeah, and thanks for some of the good suggestions. And Richard, if you ever want
Yeah.
to follow up about your biomarkers question and discussion, we'd welcome that because it's something we have talked about in an abstract sense before and been a little bit intimidated by, but maybe you can push us over the brink and get us to actually do something. Always good to have some impetus.
Sure, thanks.
Thanks to all of you. Kelly, thank you for the organization that goes into this. And we really appreciate the opportunity to both hear from your everybody that's on the call and also to give you a little bit of information about what we've been working on.
yes, thank you. We appreciate your time, and we will look forward to the next in our series, and we will be sending out emails about that.